Welcome to the 98% podcast, where we hear real stories from real people. And I'm here with Greg. So, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself.
36 years old, living in Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up around St. Louis area, about 50 miles west. Really small town feel. You know, I think I graduated with like 60 people in my high school class. Everybody knew everybody. And then, you know, I've lived in other big cities, going through Springfield, and then now I'm in Kansas City working in property management.
Nice. And then that's where you met David, right? It was college?
Yeah, so we met freshman year of college down at Missouri State University. We both were on the cheerleading squad. That's how we met. You know, it was one of those like instant connections. You know, we had similar interests. Obviously, on the cheer squad, we saw each other all the time. Ended up taking a few classes together, eventually becoming roommates. And so, you know, we went through the whole college experience pretty much together.
Pretty awesome. It's funny thinking too, like, I'll bet you guys got pretty close being roommates. You get to learn a lot about people, good and bad, I'm sure.
You know, we had our ups and downs, that's for sure. Learned a lot about each other, you know, specifically like what we like to set the thermostat at. You know, that was always the point of contention with everybody.
Okay.
You know, so.
Yeah, so what do you set it at?
I'm at a 68, a cool 68.
Okay. What's David?
I would say David's at least 70 or over 70. But
really?
I don't know now, though. He may have changed. You never know.
Yeah, I think I keep my thermostat at like 71 is like ideal, because I'm trying to think like what's comfortable to sleep, but also what's not going to use a lot of money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And run nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a 71, but I could probably go cooler and be very comfortable. But yeah.
And that's my main thing is being comfortable when I sleep.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's the worst thing is being hot.
And I run hot all the time.
So how this works, Greg? So I'm going to go through. I have a set of questions. I sent them to you, so you can kind of review them, look over them, whatever. And we're just going to go through. And the goal is just for you to kind of build a connection with the audience with a connection with you. That's going to be on here, and yeah, that's kind of like the whole point of the podcast. So the first question was, how do you know me? But we kind of already established that without me asking that question.
Yeah.
Unless there's more that you want to add to it, which you're more than welcome to.
No, I appreciate the kind words about thinking I was a cool person. I never, when David approached me about game night, you know, I had never done anything like that. He told me about the, you know, elaborate game setups that you had and kind of what it was about. So, you know, I was interested. I couldn't remember, and maybe you can correct me, but I think I won the first night I came over, or maybe the second night.
Maybe. What did we play? What was the first time we played? Was it HeroScape?
It was HeroScape. Yeah.
Okay. Who was all there? Were my parents there at that one too?
Yeah, they were. And I know you gave me, you razzed me because it was like beginner's luck or something.
You might have. That's what seems to always happen in that game. We always invite someone new and they almost always win. We're like, yeah. You know who did win too? Remember when Will won and never showed up to another game night?
Yes. He took my crown.
Sweet. I hope he watches this because he needs to get on this podcast.
Will, you need to come back, Will.
Love that. But yeah, it's fun. It's funny because because we met at game night, and then I mean honestly, like it's kind of like you, me, and Max. I feel like we all kind of connected pretty well, and we just hang out like we've always known each other. But it's been almost a year now. I mean that's a long time.
Yeah, well,
kind of weird to think about.
We were doing once a month for pretty steady. There for a while. I think we did all of 2023 game nights.
Yeah, we did. We did. And then, we fizzled off the last couple of months.
Life happens.
Yeah, exactly. And we did one last month, but yeah, that was interesting. We did meet a new friend.
We met a new friend. He might replace Max.
Yeah.
The requirement was he's got to have 4 good tires, so.
Sent a picture of his spare, like you can't get that repaired. What are we doing here?
Very respect, Max, if you're watching.
Dude, it's funny because like I don't know. I mean, I assume he knows how to change a tire, but It's funny that some stuff people just don't know. And I was talking with someone the other day. I was on the phone, and they were talking about how like they just bought this house, and they're like, and they were trying to figure out how to do like the like hook up the the dryer exhaust, like the little coil or the little pipe that goes from the
Yeah,
exhaust to outside. It
that
didn't have one, and he wasn't sure if you needed one or not. So he said he started it up, and dust flying everywhere. And then he was really happy that he got to the store and repaired that. But he's like, nothing else. I can't repair anything else. So I don't know. It's just funny thinking that like I don't know. Everybody just has their things that they just either don't want to do or they just don't care to learn, or maybe
yeah.
it's just too much. I don't know. Cool. So first question, we'll start at the beginning. So, what was growing up like for you?
Growing up for me is pretty good. Like I already said, I grew up in a very small town. We'd go outside, ride bikes, hike the creeks, go to the parks. Generally, outside was where we spent most of our time growing up. Uh, Came from a solid family foundation. My parents have been married they went on 40 years this year. So they've been together a long time. And then, life was pretty easy until I hit college, to be honest. And,
Okay.
nowadays I work a lot. And if I'm not working, I'm just trying to ride my motorcycle.
So do you have siblings?
I do. I have 2 older sisters. I'm the youngest of 3.
Okay.
I'm the baby.
How was that having 2 older sisters?
It wasn't bad being the only boy and being the baby. I got pretty much everything I wanted, and through that dynamic, they're both great. We didn't have the closest of a relationship growing up, but I think now, like, we're closer than ever. So,
Really?
yeah.
So what do you think led to that?
I think distance. So, whenever I left for college, it was 3 hours away down in Springfield. And so that took me away from my family, which kind of makes you reflect a little bit about priorities, I guess. And so my oldest sister stayed in my hometown. She's married, has 2 kids. The middle sister ended up getting married to a guy that is in the military.
Uh-huh.
And so she moved around a bit. When I was in college, she was in Seattle. And so the stars aligned, and, for whatever reason, so I got my position now is in Kansas City, and their final settled orders with the military was Kansas City. And so we actually live together now, where I can go to her house anytime I want. She can come over anytime I want, or anytime she wants. And so our parents come over, they get to see both of us. And so I think that really, the distance is what kind of made us close.
It's kind of cool. I mean, that's a saying, right? Like, what is it? Distance makes the heart grow fonder or whatever. I don't know. I mean, that's usually like a relationship thing, but like,
It is
that's
a
relationship, right? So it's interesting. That's cool though that that you rekindled like that, or not doesn't necessarily rekindle, but got a stronger relationship. So
And there was always love there, but I think it was more so like brother, sister, I would always pick on them. They would pick on me, type of thing.
yeah,
Now we're adults. So.
makes sense. So then you mentioned as a kid getting kind of everything you wanted. So is that why college was so hard?
College was very hard for other reasons. And I just kind of joked about getting everything I wanted. They give me crap about it all the time because I was a big.
Yeah.
But, one of your questions is going to be about struggles, and I go into detail. I can go into detail college.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I mean, that's kind of where we would segue. So yeah. So what's the biggest struggle that you made it through?
There's been a lot of struggles Several things. I've had 4 knee surgeries, 2 on each knee. And so that was a tough time trying to get through those. I played sports my whole life. And so each one of those were sports related, except the last one. It was drunken antics. So that's unfortunate. Some other struggles, been through a failed engagement, depression, went through the ringer there. And then just college in general, I think would summarize one of my biggest struggles trying to get through. Nobody in my family had gone to a university. So it was kind of uncharted territory in a sense. There was no roadmap. Didn't really have family I could ask for too much guidance or their experiences through it. So I kind of had to work my own path there, which was fine. But I think I let my desires get a hold of me versus what my priorities probably should have been. I was there more for the party than I was for the schooling. It was an opportunity, like I said, 3 hours away from home. Nobody to really answer to but myself. That type of mentality. I ended up changing my major 3 times. It was a rough road. It took me 7 years to get through a bachelor's degree. I did flunk out twice, which I didn't even know that you could flunk out. In my mind, I'm paying for these classes. How are you going to tell me I can't pay for the classes and go to school? But yeah, I learned the hard way. You could flunk out. Didn't know that was a thing. And it wasn't from, lack of intelligence or failing test or whatever. I just wasn't going to class. My priorities were not. And so, I just had that I'll deal with it later mentality. Basically, cheerleading and partying was more important to me than finishing school. At the time, I was in the moment more so than like looking down the road. The first time I flunked out of school, though, I had to appeal to get back in. And so that process was pretty interesting for me. They sat me down in a room in front of a bunch of executives for the university and had to plead my case and tell them why I wasn't a screw up and why they should consider me to come back and all this. And ultimately they let me come back. They gave me another shot, which I was good for another year or 2. And then ended up flunking again. Again, priorities got out of whack. The second time I flunked out, they said, no appeal, you're out. You got to get your grades back up. So I ended up taking classes at a community college for 2 semesters, which I think that's when it really sunk in for me because I was already really close. I had like 4 semesters left. And so these 2 semesters, I was taking classes that I had already taken before and that I've already essentially paid for, right? And so I had to retake those just to get my grades up and to take other classes so that I could fill my schedule. So not realizing what that was going to do to me financially later on in life. That wasn't what I was thinking about at the time. But, I did end up getting my grades up, reapplying to Missouri State and finishing with a bachelor's degree in hospitality management. That's where I'm at now. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest struggles, but it's also one of my biggest achievements at the same time because, I did stick it out. I did finish it. I do have the degree. In a sense, I guess I am using it.
Yeah. So what was it like? What was it like in those moments? How are you feeling when it came to flunking out? Because I can't imagine that being a pleasant experience.
It's not. You run through a lot of emotions. Like I said, cheerleading was very important to me at the time. So having to go in front of your whole team and tell them, hey, I flunked out. I know we've been working 2 months leading up to this competition in 2 weeks, and I've been a key part of this routine. And now I can't do it because I flunked out in the fall semester. That was tough for me, letting all my teammates down, essentially, let myself down. It was a lot of emotions for sure. And I think that's where the growth comes in, as far as, say my nieces or nephews, or if I ever have kids one day, come to me and ask me advice about going to college, I'll probably share the story with them, just so they know. And that's not saying that that's why I did it, but if I would have known that this was a thing, maybe I would have made different choices.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's funny in hindsight, it's always really clear, but in the moment, right, I probably felt kind of like the end of the world, right? Letting your team down, flunking out. But then I liked your point, right, of like the reflection piece of thinking like, what did that experience do for you though, right? And honestly, you tell me, but you're probably a much different person now had you gone through that than you would have been otherwise.
100%. Like, a lot of people always ask if you could do something different, would you? And I probably would have went to my classes and not had to pay extra. I think that's the biggest thing for me now is I'm, crippled in student loan debt, essentially. And I could probably cut a third of that by just going to class and finishing in 4 years instead of changing my major 3 times and flunking out and dragging it on 7 years.
Sure. And imagine not learning from that experience and then having to deal with something as a 36-year-old adult when there's way more responsibilities because you're out on your own. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's crazy. And some people don't learn from those mistakes. And the fact that you did, I think that's the whole thing, right? It's just learning from it. So it's big. And
it's growth for sure.
So you also mentioned the knee issues. So what sports were you playing when that happened?
So the first time it happened was my senior year of high school. I was playing football. In my school, I told you it was a small town. My freshman year of high school was the first year we ever had varsity football. And so football in my town was a big deal. Like, this is the first time we've ever had the program. And so by our senior year, we made districts. And I know this sounds like a corny, movie, but, I was a running back. I was going for a school and state record, and we were in the district title game, and I ended up tearing my ACL. And so I had to stop immediately, obviously, had to get surgery. I recovered very quickly from the first one. I'm very athletic, always in the gym. And so, my body just naturally snapped back. I was young. And following in that summer, end of summer, I picked up baseball because I was able to get back at it. And I ended up tearing the other knee, the ACL, playing baseball that same year. And so I had 2 surgeries off the bat. Then the third one, trying to remember. The third one was the drunken antics. So I had a scholarship for football at Missouri State, but with the knee injuries, I just had to do it. Ended up doing cheerleading instead, which ironically, my girlfriend, I think this is a story for a lot of guys that get into cheerleading, but my girlfriend was the one who talked me into it at the time, my senior year of high school. And so that's where I was then researching colleges that had co-ed squads. And so Missouri State was one that I'd already been looking at for football. And so I went there, part of the team bonding. When you first start at the program, we did a little scavenger hunt. You go around campus, some of the older teammates, will point things out, like this building covers, human sciences or whatever. And so one of the things was to take a picture on the statue of the bear. And we did that, and I jumped off and tore my ACL for the third time on that one. And then the fourth time was during cheerleading at a game. I threw a backflip, back tuck, and tore my ACL again the other knee.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah, which, that's been a struggle too. Just, as you get older, obviously, each time I tore my ACL, I struggled with my weight, fluctuating from 10, 20 pounds, just by being laid up in bed. And my mom's a wonderful cook. So, I had good meals, but not being able to exercise. And so, yeah, it's been a struggle since, but at least I don't have bionic knees. Okay,
Yeah, oh, for sure. For sure. And then you mentioned one other thing that I want to talk about, if you're comfortable talking about it, but you mentioned depression.
yeah.
So has that been something that you've dealt with? Like, because, right, there's a difference between being depressed and depression, right? Depression is something I think people chronically deal with, or at least in certain times, whereas being depressed is just like a feeling or something that you get, an emotion. But how long have you been dealing with that?
I think since college is when I really kind of like acknowledged that, okay, maybe I'm going through something here. And that dealt with a lot of things too, emotionally, being away from your family, going through what I went through with flunking out, letting people down. It was always more about trying to satisfy other people more than it was about me, which is something I'm very aware of now, and something that, moving forward, I can identify pretty quickly if I'm getting in those funks. I like to remove myself from that type of situation where, I feel like I am needing validation from somebody else, which was kind of part of the failed engagement as well. It all kind of goes hand in hand, but, I think the best way I've dealt with it is I have a core group of friends that really lean on. Family, like I said, we're close now. I lean on them and I cut the negativity out, essentially. It's easy to compartmentalize for me. It's something I've really grown to be able to see, I guess.
Yeah, so you shifted your environment in
Yeah.
order to serve you better. So how did you notice? Like, how did you know that you were dealing with depression? Like, what were the signs?
At the time I was drinking a lot. Just going through college. Like during the week in Springfield, there was a college night every night somewhere. I would much rather be doing that than, studying for an exam or going to bed so I can get up to go to class. And I feel like that was masking some of my emotions to like deal with being a failure, considered a failure for flunking out of school or going through all those emotions. I think that's where I started to realize, like, hey, okay, maybe take a step back, like think about a 5-year plan, because the road you're going down now is not where you want to be in 5 years. Like, you want to get through college. All your friends now in college, everybody on the squad now that you're saying that is more important than your own life, they'll be gone in 5 years. They'll be on to their own life. They'll be starting a family. They'll be out of town. All those people leave. And so I just finally had to like rein it in, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's funny because why I asked about that too, because I think that's an interesting emotion, and I think it's interesting that people go through that. I feel like I relate too. So I don't tell people much about this, and I don't know this much either. Like, I don't know depression. I don't understand.
Yeah.
But like in hindsight, like I remember a specific moment in my life being very depressed. But it's funny because in the moment I didn't notice. Like I was the person that said, I'm okay. I'm fine. Totally fine. Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing all this other stuff because I've just never been that type of person. But, I mean, if I look back at it, I lost a ton of weight. So I was super skinny.
Yeah.
I I was playing music, which music I think was my way to cope with the situation, was writing a lot of songs. But yeah, I just remember I would stay up till like 3 or 4 in the morning, not wake up till like past noon. I just didn't feel like I had a purpose or anything. And that was right after high school. I moved so basically just graduated high school. Then we moved to a different city. So I knew nobody. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I know what helped me get out of that funk initially was I started working out, and going to the gym. And
Yeah.
that was a big thing, a big catalyst for the change for me, because yeah, before that I was like, dang, okay.
I
So
got
I was, yeah, I was very self-conscious around that time too. Like it was probably the lightest I ever weighed, or as basically I'll say as an adult. And dude, I was wearing like 2 or 3 shirts because I wanted to look bigger, because like I literally was like so self-conscious about it. But I remember that. And then I think I still deal with it sometimes, which is interesting. I didn't when I was married, but since I got divorced, like I have spurts where I just don't really want to get up, or I don't want to do things. And it's interesting. Lately, since I got my new job, everything's been fine. And I felt good about like, I've been getting up at 6 in the morning to go to the gym before work and all this stuff, and things are going well there. But it's an interesting thing. Like I struggle with it too sometimes. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if it's depression or if it's just being depressed, because it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
But it happens, and I'm not always completely aware with it. Like I'm becoming more aware of it, but I don't know. It's almost like a numb feeling. Like I don't know what to do with it. Right. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. That was a good way to put it. Like what you said about not understanding it in the moment, like looking back, like, I'll go a little bit further. So there's a point when I was in the dorms and I'd been drinking, just had an argument with the girl I was in a relationship with. It's just an overwhelming sense of I'm not going to be able to please everybody. What am I doing? And I got to the point where, and this is really what kind of turned me around and opened my eyes. Nobody was in my dorm. I was talking to this girl, put her on speakerphone, ended up grabbing a bunch of pills, taking a bunch of pills, to the point where she was scared enough that she called the police.
Dang.
And so the police got involved. They came to the door, had the RA unlock the door, and I was in there, puking up all these pills. It's so, that's tough. Not a lot of people know that. It's really something that opened my eyes as far as how close I am with family and friends now. Because, when you tell that story to certain people and how they just kind of opened up and like, I'll always be there, that's more than enough validation that I didn't think I was going to get by being a failure to flunk out of school. So it's just something that I, and again, have grown and can see now.
Crazy too, because like I feel like in those moments, like going through something like that, like I've never went through anything like that, right? Not in that manner, but when you think about that, like you don't probably take relationships for granted anymore, do you?
No.
It's interesting to think, you know what I mean? Like it takes moments like that for us to do that. And like that's the same thing with me. Like I think I took a lot of relationships for granted before my divorce. The minute I got divorced, and dude, I still feel lonely all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It happens, but then it makes me realize that, like, I don't know, I value my relationships now more. Like I really care about people, and I make it a point to like let people know that too these days, because I think it's really important that they know how I feel.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I would want is to for them not to know, right?
It's key, because I was the type of person that would bottle everything. I would never talk about it. And so, yeah, I'm very much the same way now. I'm going to tell you straight up how I feel. We're either going to work through it, or, I'm going to cut that out of my life. If you're not the right one, I want to find out quickly. This is basically where I'm at.
Yep. So, well, you probably noticed this about me too. I'm always a connector. I don't know if you noticed that. Like, if people aren't talking, I always am the person to like send a message like, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" Or,
Yeah.
how's it like? I've always been like that. It's like I like to keep relationships going just because
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like it's important, and a lot of people don't, and for good reason. I mean, people have things they're doing, and last thing they, you know, are focused on sometimes is like those types of connections. But I was thinking about that even yesterday. Like I set up my old team that we all got laid off together at Nike. I was like, hey, dude, let's all meet together. So we had a FaceTime just to see where everybody's at, everybody's doing, and I don't know, it means a lot to me. So I want to make sure that people know that I care and that people feel cared for because, yeah, being lonely sucks.
Yep.
Okay, so next questions. What's something you're currently going through that's positive or negative?
Currently I'm navigating a big transition in my career. So, earlier this year, March, April, I was promoted to the director of property management for
Nice.
the management company that I work for. So, like I'm now a corporate executive. It's exciting. It's daunting. Long hours, lots of stress, but it's also rewarding. And, it's challenging me a little bit to step out of my comfort zone, embrace the uncertainty. It's an opportunity for growth, for sure. Essentially, I manage operations for apartment complexes above the regional manager level. So you got your regional managers, your managers, your maintenance staff, everything that runs properties. So far, I love it. I worked hard to get here. Started as a manager, worked my way up. And so I'm excited to kind of see what that brings.
Yeah, that's awesome. I liked what you said about embracing uncertainty. So I read this book that I really like by Mark Manson, and he talked about 5 things that should be your values. I think it was a book on values, essentially, because people always say the values. I value, having nice things, or I value living a long time, or I value, like they just, that like they have their little values. But his approach was like, well, the things we value, what if you valued the opposite? And one of them was like, what if one of your core values was, embrace uncertainty? And it's like, well, if you think about that, if you embraced uncertainty, you'd be much better on in life because most of what happens in life is uncertain. And I deal with that too sometimes. Like sometimes like it's like I want certainty and there's not a whole lot that's actually certain. And that's just, me wanting to hold on to that, right? But like embrace uncertainty. One of the other values he had was basically accept your mortality, right? That you're going to die. And right, and you think like, oh, that seems like a terrible value. Like, no, not really. That means you're going to do the things that really matter to you,
Exactly.
right? Because it's all going to fall. One of my favorite ones that he talked about in the book was he said, accept that everything in your life is your responsibility. Or basically take responsibility for everything in your life. So every decision, and which is a hard thing to do because when someone does you wrong or something happens, the first thing you want to do is you want to point through like, well, you did this.
Yeah.
And then guess what? If you go far enough back, you are the reason they're in your life in the first place.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. So like you can narrow it down to where everything is like you're basically responsible for everything in your life. And I think that was the value in that book that I think resonated the most with me, that I was like, dang.
And that's where kind of circling back to like trying to navigate relationships, right? Like I want to cut that out immediately if I see anything like that, to where down the line it's going to be toxic or, we're not adding value to each other's life. It should be mutually beneficial type relationship. A lot of people are selfish, and so, or a lot of people just want to please others or whatever. But, I feel like you said, you have the opportunity up front to kind of cut that before it gets to that point.
Yep. It's funny. I just pulled my book out, my journal. I forgot I got notes on this because like I can't remember the other two, and I'm really curious about them now, which is really funny. Let me see if I can find it really fast.
Well, in embracing uncertainty, I said that because property management is like, every day is different. There's some jobs that are like routine cookie cutter, but I never know. I have an idea, but I never know what I'm going to walk into.
Yeah. Yep. Here we go. Ready? Okay. So let's see. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, uncertainty was one. Take responsibility for everything in your life. I said mortality. The other one is failure. What if failure was one of your values?
I get, I've went through some failure.
Yeah,
Is it like an opportunity for growth and learning, I guess?
that's exactly what it is, right? That's because it's you can't really succeed without failure for the most part because there's so much growth in it, right? So if you accept it as a value, it makes sense that like you're going to embrace failure with open arms, and that seems actually like not a bad perspective to come from because usually people like, and I've been like this. Fear of failure is a real thing, right? And we keep ourselves from doing some things because of that reason.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then the next one is rejection. What if rejection was a value?
And failure and rejection kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
Right.
In a sense, I was always trying to like please others and get their validation. And so, when you get that rejection, you feel like a failure in a sense. So yeah, that's pretty
Think about it like, yeah, and think about it like embracing your values. You have to reject things. You have to say no, right? If you want to live the way you want to live, and you talked about this just a second ago, you have to cut people out sometimes. You have to say no to things in order to say yes to the right things. If you don't, to your point, you're going to be trying to people please. You're going to be doing things that aren't in your character or your nature. So
yeah.
I don't know. So that was funny. So you said uncertainty, and it just totally triggered that. But I love that book because I thought it was it's such a cool way to look at values in a different light.
Yeah.
Okay, so who is someone that's changed your life that doesn't know it?
So there's a couple. Is that all right? I think one that sticks out, kind of going back to my college days, I was working retail at Community Sports. One of my managers basically was talking to me one day, asking me what my major was, kind of joking around. He said, of course you have that major, hospitality management. That's a jock major, is what he called it. He said it's an easy major. All the jocks take it just to get the major done. You won't do anything with it. You're going to be stuck in retail your whole life. You're never going to find a job in that field that, without taking a pay cut. So, you're going to be stuck in retail and work your way up just like me, essentially, was his spiel. So, I took that being stubborn and wanted to make sure that didn't happen. So, in a sense, he changed my life with that comment because I didn't know what I was going to do. This job kind of came out of nowhere when I applied to be the manager of apartment complex down in Springfield. Knew nothing about the industry. And so I just kind of took a leap of faith. It wasn't necessarily in my field, like as far as hospitality management, there's a lot of things that correlate and transfer, but it's not like I'm running a restaurant or a hotel, So that was something that definitely stood out as far as someone who changed my life. And two more that I have are kind of similar. When I got into cheerleading, there was two people that stuck out as mentors. One's name is Jeremy Vincent. He was an older classman. While I was at Missouri State, he and I are great friends. He's since moved to Florida, and so we don't get to see each other as much as we'd like, but we still text, once a week, twice a week. We're checking in on each other, or I'm making a phone call to him just to check in. Basically, it goes back to what we said about distance, right? He's the type of friend that we could go days, months, years, and then see each other and pick up right where we left off. I think our friendship definitely stacks up against the test of time. So he's kind of changed my life as far as taught me what it's like to be consistent and be there for someone. He's always someone to look up to as a mentor. So I appreciate him. And then the next one would be my friend Nick. I would say he's been my biggest cheerleader in a sense. Just a genuine guy. He's always someone that if you'd call, he'd be there. Something that I kind of mold my life around now. Unfortunately, Nick passed away from a heart attack a few years ago. But, I still got voicemails, videos, and text messages from him where he was always just stepping up and being there for me, especially during my depression, what I was going through. So he definitely changed my life a little bit with all that.
That's special too. I don't think we realize how much that a kind word or kind gesture can help somebody out, especially someone going through something like that. I had a friend. So when I first went through my divorce, I had a neighbor friend that, because when you're going through something, the last thing you probably want to do is reach out to anybody.
Yeah.
Which is counterproductive, but for some reason you just don't want to. And
you don't
at the beginning, at the beginning I did okay because I remember going on walks and it gave me the energy to call people. I called a lot of people, but I was hitting moments where I just didn't want to reach out, didn't want to hang out. Nothing felt enjoyable essentially. And my neighbor would every once in a while he'd just reach out hey, you want to come over and hang out? Sure. And it was awesome. And there's so many times where I just think about how crucial of a role he played in that sense. And it sounds like the same thing for your friend, right, Nick, that was just going through tough times and he just would say some kind words and be there for you. And that's something people don't realize. It takes nothing. It's free to say nice things to people, but it can change somebody's life.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't believe.
Yep. And he was definitely that guy for sure.
Crazy.
But yeah, he's missed. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to your first person, it's funny how people can be not very nice, but it challenges you in a good way. Because think about it, with that person, you ended up being a much better. You did what you wanted to do because he said you couldn't do it. And it's funny. So those people play a big factor and role in people's life too in a positive way. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
That someone's negativity could be your positivity.
Yeah. I couldn't let him be right about that.
That's awesome. Okay. So what's a skill or talent that you could share with us?
You kind of mentioned. So I play guitar, or I played guitar. I don't play as much as I should. I learned from my dad, who's another person that has changed my life. He was in a band growing up, mainly classic rock is what he played. Every time I had a knee surgery and I was stuck in a bed, he was teaching me chords and teaching me progressions, and until I finally just kept practicing and kept playing after I was out of the rehab. So something I need to pick back up, but that's where my talents are, I guess.
It's funny because I know that about you, and I'm still bummed that we haven't jammed yet. Why have we not jammed?
I don't know.
Because I think there was one game night. I think we went to your house, and I was like, because I noticed your guitar, and I was like, I think, can't remember if I said we should jam out or hey, could you play for us? And we just didn't.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Dude, we need to do that. We need to jam out. How can we have been together for over a year and not jammed out yet?
That's a good question, because my dad's got the whole setup at his house. He's got all the amps. He's got a bass guitar, electric guitars, drums, everything, microphones.
I mean, you've been over to my house. You've seen mine.
Yeah.
I got my guitar and speaker. I got my drum sets. So dang. Okay, we got to do that. That needs to be on our list of things to do. It's just at least jam out once and see what it's like.
Yep. We could do that. I need to pick it back up. I need a good heads up before we do that.
Okay. Well, hey, let's do it soon.
Okay.
Because, I haven't, because I haven't been playing as much either, but I pick it up quick. Like, I don't really forget my stuff, but what I've noticed is like some of my fast stuff gets a little rusty, but if I play for a day or two straight, for a while, I'll be there.
Mine's mainly endurance, being able to play for long periods.
Yeah, that's fair. Ooh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. But that's how it was. That's how it is with my vocals. If I don't practice my vocals enough, like, I still got it. I mean, I'd say I'm better now than I've ever been as far as that goes. But as far as like endurance, I haven't practiced enough to do that. Like, I remember doing 2-hour concerts plus being able to scream almost the whole time. And now I'm like, in the car, and after, a good, 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of getting exhausted.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wild. Okay. So what is something that you are learning about currently that you'd like to teach us?
So something that I've kind of been diving into, and I think I heard you mention this on a previous aspect, stoicism. So, like Ryan Holiday, stillness is the key. It kind of goes back to how you just slow things down, right? Like, slow things down, take a look, take a step back, and that type of philosophy really just aligns with my life right now. Very well. And so that's what I'm kind of into. I tend to be very logical decisions. A lot of people say that I don't react when certain people probably would react. I like to kind of just make sure I gather all the information before I make my determination or my judgment. It's been a great tool for me in this leadership role. And I think it's one of the reasons I'm successful in my current position as a leader. That's pretty cool. I know you have some opinions on stoicism. It's helped me with my self-awareness for sure. We kind of talked about it. I feel no guilt if someone reaches out to me with a disingenuous request. I've accepted the fact that sometimes people are selfish. And so in those sense of cases, I feel no guilt to cut that out and just not acknowledge it. Or just don't respond, or just straight up say, hey, no, I'm not going to be the one to help you today, or whatever. No, I want to give somebody what they give me, right? Once you give in to a leech, they'll suck you dry.
Yeah. Well, stoicism's funny because I think it gets a bad rep where people think like, oh, you bottle your emotions, you don't feel. And it's like, it's actually not about not feeling. It's about not reacting to your feelings. That's the difference, right? You're still feeling it, but you're shifting your perspective perception on what is happening, which I think is a huge asset, right? To your point, like, there's a big difference between blowing up at someone's face and just being able to take in the info and be like, okay, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I just need you to leave me alone. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
what you just said, it's kind of why I like Hulk is my favorite, character. Because, you don't see the Hulk until he's at that limit, right? Same thing that goes with what you just said, if you don't react, then eventually, everybody's got their breaking point. So they're just like with Hulk, he's smart, logical, Bruce Banner, and then you make him mad and you finally get to see. But that's what I'm kind of researching more.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, stoicism is so helpful. That was probably one of the biggest things that helped me. Same thing during my divorce. That's like what I always bring up because that's like that was my big struggle for sure. But when I did that, I found the book Obstacle is the Way. Did you read that one?
I haven't read that one yet, but I haven't.
That's so good. That's one of my favorite books. Like that, especially in like that current circumstance. So good. It was probably the most helpful book. And every time I talk to anybody, I'm like, hey, you need to read this book. Because it changed so much. Because for me, like, I love the way he writes because he sets things up really simple. In that book, he broke it down into 3 different groups and he talked about it. So the first one was perception. How do you shift your perception on what's happening right now? Because that's what you have to do first. Whatever circumstances are happening, how do you shift that perception? So where it's, yes, it could be bad, but how do you say that it's working for you, right? So the obstacle the point is to go through the obstacle or use the obstacle, harness it essentially, not to go around it. So he talks about perception, then he talks about action, so the proper action that you take, and then he talks about will at the very end, and it's actually a really cool setup. But I read that one of his, and then I read Ego is the Enemy, and that was also a really good one too.
Yeah.
So
I got the box set with Obstacles Away, Stillness is the Key, and I think Ego is the Enemy. All
nice. Yeah, you gotta listen out. That's good. But yeah, Stoicism is great, and I think it's funny because it's an old philosophy.
Yeah,
but like it ebbs and flows with times. And Ryan Holiday, I remember talking about this, is he said, in tough times, like people tend to look for answers, and a lot of times we find answers in some of the old stuff like Stoicism. It's like it's not new.
Yeah,
it's just he's a modern day, I guess you could say, Stoic philosopher, but it's not new information. It's just now people are willing to hear it.
Yeah, and he does the daily Stoic. You can get that newsletter in your email, and so that's what I start with every morning. I'll read that.
I get the emails too.
Yeah,
very cool.
That's cool.
Okay, so what are you doing for fun?
For fun, so me and a buddy, we started trying to fine tune our barbecue. We're gonna start cooking for competition starting next year.
Right.
And so he ended up buying this massive barbecue trailer, which I can show you some pictures. But it's huge. It's a full trailer setup. Got 2 huge drums. It's an offset smoker. Got a huge smoker box.
Nice.
You could fit so much barbecue on it. And so we've been practicing on that a few times leading up until the next competition season. So that's what we're doing. I'll invite you to the next event so you can try some if you like barbecue.
Dude, I love barbecue, and I would be so down for that.
Yeah. We want all the feedback, all the criticism. We're really trying to, hopefully win some competitions.
There you go. So where are you going to compete at?
There's the Kansas City Barbecue Society, and they host anything from a small event to the World Series of Barbecue. So there's a bunch of small events that you can do throughout the state of Missouri. There's smaller ones, and then there's bigger ones to where that would basically enter you into a chance to compete at the World Series Barbecue. There's also some other bigger ones around the country, like there's the Jack Daniels Invitational, Tennessee. There's the Memphis in May down in Tennessee. And there's some other ones I think in Texas. But yeah, we're really into it. So we started probably at the beginning of this year. So we've been practicing all year.
Hey, what's the name of the barbecue?
So it's called Bearded Barbecue. This is what we're going with.
Bearded Barbecue. Okay. You have a logo yet?
Not yet. We're still waiting. Somebody's supposed to be designing that.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, hey, maybe we could do some sponsorship or something. Maybe we could have the 98% podcast booth outside the thing, asking people questions.
There we go. We could do it. Collaborate.
Sick. I'm down for that. Cool. Okay. So we have just a couple questions left. So we talked about, we covered a lot of information today. So now if you were to take everything from when you were born to now and write a book or a story, what would that title be called?
As corny as it sounds with what we've already talked about, embrace the uncertain path, or, embracing the uncertain path is probably where my life is kind of unfolded, just because, starting young, going into college, didn't know anything about the college life or how to navigate it. That was an uncertainty. Going through the trials and tribulations of flunking out, jumping from retail to property management. And then, like I said, every day in this business is uncertain. So I feel like my life is just going to continue down the uncertain path.
I like that. I like that a lot. So now this is kind of like the portion before we get into the last question. This is the portion of the call where you get to talk about whatever you want. So if there's anything you want to cover that we didn't cover, or if you want to market yourself, or I know you already talked about your barbecue, but anything that you want to share with the audience, this is kind of your time.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to the barbecue if anybody listening wants to follow the journey, it's bearded barbecue _KC. And we're only on Instagram for now. I think we're going to probably start YouTube or something else to document our project. As far as anything else, kind of a little bit more about my fun side. So I like reality TV. It's probably one of my guilty pleasures. Survivor or The Challenge. I don't know if you've heard of those series. There's a whole world in Discord that does online reality games. I don't know if you're familiar, where they model a game. So there's hosts and they cast people for the show, and they model the whole game of like Survivor, and they run it through Discord. And it's really interesting because you get to meet a lot of people from around the US or even around the globe. There's people that get on wait lists. You have to apply to be in the game. The hosts, they ask you all these questions, and then they cast you in a sense. And then, you're one of 18 people that get to play in the game for 30 days. I'm actually in one right now. And so, every 24 hours, we get a new challenge, and then you're on a tribe, and they can kind of put you in different rooms in Discord to where you're only talking to certain people, and, you can hunt for idols and everything you can do on Survivor, basically. So that's been pretty fun. I've gotten into that probably in the last year.
Dude, that's pretty sweet. It's funny. I've been told I should be on Survivor by way too many people. It's really interesting. So it gets me tempted. I've hopped on the site a couple times and almost applied and then changed my mind, but I'm curious. Maybe I should, because I've had way too many people say, you would probably do good on that. You should be on it. And I'm like, I haven't even watched it. I don't even know. Like, I understand what it's about, but I've never watched it.
That might be a good thing, though.
Maybe
I can give you a little background because I've seen all of them.
Okay, sweet. Well, maybe I'll just do it sometime. Maybe I'll just sign up. The only problem is I'd have to make sure it's okay with my job to leave for. I don't know how long you have to leave for.
At least a month.
Yeah, dang, that'd be wild. But cool. Well, maybe this is another reason why I need to do it. I keep being told, so we'll see.
You should do it.
Okay. So, and by the way, so on your handle here for Bearded Barbecue, is it Bearded BBQ or actually barbecue spelled out?
Yeah, Bearded BBQ.
Okay, gotcha.
_KC.
Perfect. Okay. And then, so now we're to the last part. So the last part is I had the previous guest create a question for you. And then now what you're going to do is you're going to create a question for the next guest we have. So let me see how far back I need to go to get this question. Let's see. Okay. So, which is funny because I think we already kind of mentioned this, but we can go more in depth. So his question was, what book or article have you read that has been thought-provoking or that has caught your interest?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about stillness is the key. Admittedly, I'm not much of a reader. And so that's something that I've been trying to do more of, which is why I got into there. I definitely want to get through the rest of his books, especially the one that you recommended as well. But I don't know how to answer that if I don't really read much.
Yeah. Well, how do you do with audiobooks?
I like audiobooks. And so I travel a lot with work. And so I do listen to a lot of podcasts. There are some audiobooks.
Because the thing is, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks. So I have the same issue where I have a hard time reading. Not like reading in general. I can read well, but like as far as hard time, like actually reading and focusing and being able to go through it. And I remember buying 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And my goal was like, okay, this is going to be the first book that I really legitimately go through and read. And Dude, it was so tough. I was trying to go through. I couldn't even finish it. And so what happened is I got to the state where I was like, where I could decide, do I want to push through and teach myself how to read, or do I want to just accept that reading's not really my thing and just learn through an audiobook?
Yeah.
So I chose the audiobook route, and it's been super helpful because I can go on a walk, I can work, I can listen. And what I do is I keep a notebook next to me, so like a journal. And anytime something sticks out, I'm like, oh, boom, and I write it down. So then I can also, so you can multitask too. So I know you can highlight in books, but I don't know. I think it's easier to just write down. So that's where I take all my notes.
But I will say that I'm not a huge fan of fiction books. I lean more towards, the philosophy or leadership or management. I do have a book that's sitting on my table that I need to read. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Be Useful. I don't know if you've heard that one. It's been sitting on my table long enough that it's probably time to pick it up and actually read it.
That's
I'll
cool.
let you know.
Yeah, let me know. It's funny because that's not unusual as far as there's been plenty of studies that say like men like highly prefer nonfiction and women highly prefer fiction. It's really interesting. And I mean, I'm sure it's the way kind of brains are wired, but it's really fascinating because it seems to, every time I have conversations, it seems to be true. Like, yeah, I don't like fiction much, but I like reading nonfiction. Then I'll talk to ladies like, what are you into? And they're just like, well, I'm reading this, this romance novel, or I'm reading this, some type of, fictional thing. And I'm always like, okay, it always proves the point. It's very rare that I see the opposite.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So then what question do you want to leave the next guest?
Let's go with, if you could have lunch with one historical figure, who would it be and why?
Okay. So question, who would yours be?
I knew you were going to ask that. Let's go with the theme here, Marcus Aurelius.
Why?
The OG Stoic philosopher. This most of the stuff that I see in the Daily Stoic obviously comes from some of the things that he talks about, nature of the human experience, and how he navigated his leadership challenges. I think that would be pretty interesting to go that far back.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that. So I will save my answer for when I do the special episode where I answer everybody's questions. So
nice. You're a special.
Which I actually have a special episode that I need to record here pretty soon because we've already had over 20. So I did a 10 episode recap. Now I need to do a 20 episode recap. So I'm going to record that soon, and then I'll answer all those questions. So you're going to be in the 30 recap because I think you're going to be episode 25.
Nice.
So should be pretty cool.
Took you a while, but you finally got me.
Yeah, whose fault was that?
I think there was a little bit of a scheduling issue too.
I mean, I'm sure we had some scheduling issues, but no, I'm just glad we decided to actually get together and have the conversations. It's been a good conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was fun kind of learning a lot about you because it's funny because we've seen each other a year, but we really think about it. People in general don't ask these questions just in the day to day, which I feel like people should because you learn a lot about people.
Yeah.
And thinking about it, I was like, man, if we would have started off with these questions like on day one, like it would have been like we would have known each other so much better.
Can you imagine, anybody new that comes into the game night, we have to hit them with these questions first.
Dude, exactly. We're like, okay, so before you can pick your army, what's the biggest struggle you've ever made it through?
See,
people being really uncomfortable, like, I don't know how to answer that. You got to answer, otherwise you have to leave. You're not part of this group. Ooh, initiation, game night initiation. There we go. Sick. Okay, well, thank you all so much, or thank you, audience, for listening. But Greg, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll do it again sometime.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Ricky.
Okay, no problem. I'll see you later.
All right.